I think sometimes it's easy for older workers to kind of put the cart before the horse and saying, like, why don't you engage? It's really easy to assume people are just apathetic. They just don't care. It's not true. It's almost never true.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Folks, we are joined by Len Harris, once again, Colorado AFL-CIO Young Worker Organizer. You heard her a while back talking about their work with the Starbucks Workers United, first unionized Starbucks store in Colorado. Really appreciated them taking the time to talk to us about her story. And so we wanted to bring her back on the show to talk about what she's doing now with the Colorado AFL-CIO, being the Young Worker Organizer, and they've taken the time to talk to us this morning. So, Len, thank you for coming back on the Valley Labor Report. I appreciate it.
It is honestly an honor. Y'all were so kind to hear me out and all the things I had to say, and gosh, all the things I even left out, which is crazy to think about. So honestly, it's an honor that I'm back here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, wanted to talk to you about this work because Adam and I have been kicking around the idea, and he's particularly been, really interested in the idea of a young worker committee or having a young worker organizer or something for the Alabama AFL-CIO, or maybe just within our labor council. I think probably part of it is because he is rapidly aging out of the cohort of young workers, so he wants to be able to get in on it while he still can.
Me too, though.
So,
I'm in the same boat.
So I guess, and I have been, and I'll level with you, Len, I have been skeptical of it. I've been skeptical of the idea of doing something like this because, I don't know where y'all are at Colorado. I can understand, like, the idea of if everything is, We've met a lot of the other kind of fundamentals and we're really in a good place kind of as a federation or as a local union or as an international, then I do think and I do understand the value proposition of having a young worker organizing initiative on top of that. But from where I'm sitting, in my local union, in our labor council, in our state federation, I just have a hard time getting excited about the idea of putting energy into something that's just targeting young workers when we're not really, there's a lot that's being left on the table with all workers first, right? So I guess, can you just explain to me, like, what is the kind of job description, I guess, for the Colorado AFL-CIO's Young Worker Organizer? What are you doing? And do you see it as something that everybody should be doing, that you should really be like, this should be kind of a priority even for, labor organizations that are kind of are leaving something to be desired in other areas? Or do you also see it as something that's like, you should really kind of have some of the more fundamental stuff done first?
That's a great question. And honestly, it's something that, like, I have to contend with as somebody who holds a position that's never been made before. So I didn't really have a template, one, to work with. And two,
right.
Pieces of how I got this position were grants. And, the part of a federation, the state federation, is having unions, all the affiliated unions, buy into some degree. So there's a lot of people's money riding on my position. So it's important to contend with that reality. Like, is this worth their money and and their time and investment, so to speak? And where I always think it's important for a union to and an organization to have some good fundamentals. I think one of the biggest fundamentals that we are lacking is establishing a foundation for young workers to exist in these spaces, because the reality is they don't. Primarily, as it stands right now, majority of organizations and members are made up of people who are 40, 50 plus. And pretty much most of the young workers that I've met with from different memberships here in Colorado, because one of the things I was tasked with doing to begin with is just to meet all the affiliated unions, or at least a good majority of affiliated unions under the federation, the organization I work for, and see, what are they doing? What do they need? What's something that they're looking for younger workers? What are they doing for younger workers, if anything, et cetera? Just kind of getting an idea of where they stand. And there were a lot of young workers that I did meet with from these memberships, like IBEW, the International Bureau of Electric Workers, and CWA, Communication Workers of America, SEIU, the pipe fitters, etc. There's so many affiliated unions that we have that I've met with. And a lot of these younger workers were like, I don't feel like my position and my opinions, and like what I care about, the issues I care about in relation to our work are being reflected in this union. I do not feel as though there is an adequate like passing of the torch that should happen from older members of the union who've been holding positions of power and decision making for long enough at this point. And that can be kind of hard to hear because it may sound as though there's a disregard for the experience that an elder in those spaces have to offer, and that's not what that is. But that doesn't change the reality that we want a passing of that torch, not just so that young people can come into power and haha, the power's all mine, but to demonstrate the ability to pass that power, the ability to let go and face, yes, the very real and valid fear that you are no longer in control and somebody with a different perspective than you, because that's just what happens sometimes with age by itself, is going to take the reins. That can be a little disconcerting, but that also shows the vitality and the ability to continue on and on with that membership, which I think is probably one of the most foundational pieces of having a strong membership and a strong union is the ability to continue beyond yourself. The ability to carry on, to pass that torch, to be able to change with the times, because that's just kind of the inevitable processing of life. Now that's very philosophical. And so let me rein it back in and also talk about what it is I'm actually tasked with doing. Because that's like, I just talked about super nebulous stuff and I didn't really talk about like, okay, what am I actually doing? So when I first got this job, a lot of it was just kind of seeing what was happening, which was very weird and different for me because I had occupied entry-level positions, especially in like food service or oh my gosh, I keep wanting to say realty, and that's absolutely not what it is. Retail. So I was in a lot of those like customer service positions prior, and it was super hard, and people didn't, respect you for it, and we weren't paid or anything, but like it was pretty straightforward what was expected of me. This was the expectation I do for a day, depending on what my job was. This job was a lot of getting a feel for the process of the federation, what my position in that federation might look like. A lot of it was just kind of seeing for the first year, which is really hard for me to contend with. I'd be like, where's my list? I want to check off my daily list. But ultimately it was meeting affiliates, meeting, not only the executives of those union affiliates, like I said, like IBEW, CWA, IATSE, pipe fitters, SEIU, AFT, I didn't name these before because I was a little just getting into a little bit of a stint, but there are numerically for my federation, there are, I think, 180 affiliated unions under our Colorado AFL-CIO, which equates to about 130,000 workers across the state of Colorado. And so I was meeting with a lot of their representatives, and then a lot of their younger workers that reside within those memberships. I was seeing how their younger worker programs operated, if they had any, which a lot of them don't, because, we're not, Colorado AFL-CIO is certainly not the worst not the worst federation off. Like we have a pretty decent process and table and executive board and what have you. And it's getting better and better, which is really exciting. That's why I'm here. But, Colorado has, I think we talked about it before, Adam, it has a lower percentage of union density than Alabama. And so I was meeting a lot of these affiliates, talking about the processes, what they cared about, what were their issues. And from that, I have to try to draw a bridge between what young workers care about and their issues and the issues of the unions that are already established. and see, okay, how can we meet in the middle? So for an example, young workers right now are really concerned about the environment. Like climate change is a huge thing for people, and that can be kind of a butting head for labor, because a lot of laborers are in, unfortunately, the fossil fuel industry and have been in the fossil fuel industry for a very long time. You have coal workers and miners, you have, gas and pipe fitters there, you have the processing plants. And as much as, I myself, like I said in my last episode, I was really motivated by protecting the environment and climate to get into labor. I can see now why like labor would be opposed to shutting down a coal plant, because what's going to happen with all of those workers? Do we actually have like a transition for those workers that makes sense, that doesn't lose them their wages, that doesn't lose their benefits? Because these people, the reality is young workers, and by young worker, they say anyone under 40, because the trades kind of skews a little older, like I mentioned. And as a person who's in their early 30s, it's nice to be like, oh yeah, I'm still a pretty young worker if it's based by under 40. But for the most part, the demographic we're really thinking about is like 18 to 28.
Right.
So yes, people under 40, but 18 to
oh
like
no, that
28.
means I'm aging out. This is my last year then. If 18 to 28 is the young workers, oh dear.
Watch out.
I thought I had a few more
watch
years.
out. Well, you do under my umbrella, so you're welcome under my umbrella.
Okay.
Ultimately, younger workers, a lot of them, either just statistically, they don't have a full family yet. They probably aren't married with kids quite yet. They don't have a home or a house, at least not one in the same way that like a person who's married with 2 kids would have. So that sort of concept of protecting like a gas worker who's been, or like a coal miner who's been mining coal for a while, who has like 3 kids and a house and a mortgage, and their benefits are really, really good, and he knows his kids are taken care of. Like, what incentive can you ask that coworker to support shutting down that coal plant if there's no like way to transition him and his family over into something that's viable and feasible for them? And that's a really hard pill to swallow, because the executives, the executives and the shareholders and the investors, they're not going to be the ones that ultimately suffer directly or most significantly by shutting down a coal plant. So
right.
I have been tasked, that's just one example. I've been tasked with like figuring out where these commonalities lie so that we can start to strengthen those commonalities, start creating avenues for those people from both of these sectors to come together, and then start working together to establish policy, legislation, action, whatever that looks like, to build a united front among, in this case, people who are environmentally conscious, like a lot of young workers are, and people who don't want workers to suffer, which that's the commonalities. Workers shouldn't have to suffer for this. There is so much money that's going up, as I talked in the last episode, like the money that we as workers make across industries is being taken from us. That is a commonality. We can start from there. And then as we branch out from that one sole like issue that connects us all, we can start specifying, okay, you're more interested in environment, you're more interested in housing, you're more interested in taxes, like whatever that looks like. So I have established a young worker table. We're still kind of working on the name, it's been quite funny, but originally it was COYWIT, Colorado Young Worker Table. But I wanted something that was a little bit more like, in Texas, they have something called YAL. It's like young
active
action.
labor leaders.
Thank you. Young active labor leaders. Thank you so much. And I was like, that's fun. That's a fun word. It's easy to remember. And it's specific, but it's also timeless. And so we're still trying to work on like that sort of, Venn diagram.
Adam and I were actually having, we can call it a discussion, a debate about that name, and he liked it, I think. I actually, I prefer, my intuition would be to lean more into like the serious like Colorado Young Workers Initiative or Colorado Young Workers Table or the Young Workers Committee of Colorado, something like that, that's like feels real and like serious and is not being like gimmicky about like,
Mm,
y'all, look,
I got
we're
you.
we're cool. We're the, we do acronyms and short words, aren't we? Do you how do you do, fellow kids, kind of thing. That I get. I love the people. I love some y'all people. I love some of them.
Hmm.
I've talked to some of them, but that's the feeling
Yeah.
that I get when I see stuff like that. But that's just I don't know. Maybe I'm a loser. I don't know.
No, no, I have to honestly, I have to own it because it's so funny that you mentioned that because I like y'all, but I wasn't gonna take it because
Hmm.
frankly, like we could be like, oh yeah, y'all, but I'm no, I didn't want that. But one of the suggestions that someone made was slay. And I was like, and they were like, yeah, solidarity, labor, action for youth. And that was my response. Like, and it was a really good friend of mine who I adore to pieces. She is actually an amazing labor leader that like I would highly
Hmm.
recommend talking to. But she recommended it. And I was like, I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but I was like, no. And it was because one, it felt really gimmicky and it felt
Hmm.
very like it was gonna go stale very quickly. I mean, Slay's
Right.
already going, it felt too gimmicky and it wasn't transcendent. It wasn't timeless.
Hmm.
And so we're still working on it, but co-work might be one of the ones. It's
Hmm.
Colorado, like I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
also we played around with slang, which was like solidarity, labor, action for the next generation.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but anyway, we have this table, whatever it's named, um, and it's we're now starting to really put together what it's going to operate, or how it's going to operate rather, and what that's going to look like. And we want to act right now as a hub. So bringing young workers in, which is our next meeting, is actually okay. How do we bring young workers in? Which one of the
Hmm.
avenues, which I've talked with Adam on a few times now, is just getting into schools,
Hmm.
using our connections with different educators, which unions are ripe with educators. We have teachers across the board. We have, people in, different colleges and professors and regents and etc. So we have a bunch of different avenues with which we can get in contact with an educator who could set us up with speaking to their students, whether it's in a civics class or a government class or, whatever particular subject matter that could easily tie itself to labor and unions, which much of it can, or our labor comes back to
Hmm.
many things, which is really, really cool. So that's just like kind of a more casual channel in the use of our connections as a federation to get that going. That's one channel in getting young workers into this space. Our next meeting is going to go over other ways we think we could bring young workers into this space, but basically bringing them into this space, acting like a hub to say, okay, do you care about the environment? Cool. We have BGA, the Blue Green Alliance, which is an organization that is designed to bring environmental groups and labor together so that they can find that common ground, and actually, get things done that are, you know, uh, uh, putting into practice climate resilience as well as taking care of workers because we can chew gum and walk at the same time.
Hmm.
Young people in particular are like, I'm sorry, I don't buy the fact that we can't do it. Like we're the wealthiest country on the face of this planet. We absolutely can come up with some really incredible, solutions to this. I don't believe this whole like we just can't do it. And so that's one of the things that we're doing with our table is acting like a hub, pointing young workers in the direction of, you know, not just already established like labor friendly organizations that are, working to address climate, housing, etc. Um, but also establishing connections that maybe haven't been made yet. So like the Sunrise Movement is a very well-known, younger-oriented movement towards environmentalism. Reaching out to the Sunrise Movement is something that we're going to be doing next. It's actually occurring as well in another space um, with my organization, where we're just trying to bring different organizations together, whether community organizations, faith-based organizations, labor organizations, etc., um, to put forth a united front of policy, legislation, actions, so that when it comes down to circumstances where we could easily be pitted against each other, not to continuously use environment and labor, but that's a really good one.
Hmm.
When it comes to circumstances where it's really easy to pit us together, we will have a united front. And as a young worker and young worker organizer, being able to unite labor and humanitarian, you know, uh, interests and issues like the environment and housing,
Hmm.
it's it excites people. It really brings people together. We saw it in the 60s, when Martin Luther King Jr. Walked with the sanitation workers. Like that was a human rights campaign, a hugely popular in at the time in both good and bad ways. And obviously we reflect now in a good way, which I'm glad it was good
Mm.
that the civil rights happened. But he coupled himself with the strike that was happening with sanitation workers. When those things happen, when we come together on those united fronts, that's when magic really happens. And young people are really impassioned about a lot of humanitarian issues. And so if labor can get behind that, and that's one of the things I'm working on is establishing those connections, then I think we'll see some incredible headwind in our sales as working people, because all of us work.
Right. Right. And so this is how new is it? When did you start on as the young worker organizer for the Colorado AFL?
I officially started in April of 2023. So I'm a
Okay.
year and some change into this position. And like I mentioned before, it's kind of sometimes hard to like contend with the structure of this job because
Mm.
before I was working on a day-to-day basis. These are the check marks I have to get done for the day.
Right.
But
Right.
with this job, there's some daily things that I do, like checking with emails and like reading up on some articles and maybe just like you plotting certain things out. But for the most part, it kind of depends on the ebb and flow of like how legislation is going to shake out after the
Mm.
legislative session. What sort of economic changes we might see in the next couple of years. There's different cycles of representatives that are dependent or reflective of what we have to work with. And of course, the ever changing dynamics of our society is something that labor constantly has to roll with the punches.
Hmm.
We had Reagan, who completely, unseated the power of unions in the past and have been that way for decades. This is something that we're now, now that this huge wave of labor positivity with the UAW and with Starbucks Workers United, it's like we're constantly seeing the way that these changes are occurring. And for the most part, they're good, but there's always some bad. So
Hmm.
I've only been here for about a year and some change, which
Right.
it's like if I was at Starbucks, I'd be like, yeah, I've been here for a year and a half. I know what I'm doing. Where
Yeah.
with this
Yeah.
job, it's like we're still feeling out the ledge session, feeling out how this
Right.
representative is
Right.
going to work with us, and
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate. And so, some of this stuff, and it's really important. And I'm sure that there are other things, other kind of community coalitions and legislative coalitions that you'd be interested in building. I'm thinking of, right now the what was it in the during the coal strikes in Britain in the 80s, there was a really big push from the LGBT community to support the miners on strike. And it was like, I can't remember. It was like gays for the miners or something. That it was something like that. I can't remember what it was, but
very catchy.
those sorts of coalitions can be really good as well. That's another one, like the LGBT community and the labor community have kind of been put at odds with one another in some cases, kind of like the like the environmental community and the labor community. And so you've been talking about some of these coalitions with other groups like outside of labor to work on common interests and to try to build these coalitions so that you're stronger and it's less easy for the powerful to break you up in future legislative fights or economic fights or things like this. I'm wondering if you has there been any work that you have done within the Federation with labor councils or local or state councils of unions on like youth recruitment, and I've got this on my mind because I just had a conversation with a UFCW grocery division director and a graduate student union local president about organizing in transient workplaces, and obviously those are going to skew very young as well. And so thinking kind of more broadly than transient workplaces, but with young people in particular, when I speak to old heads, you could say, in the labor movement, it is striking how common it is that they have, not a negative opinion of the youth vis-a-vis their relationship to the labor movement, but frustration with the youth about their lack of engagement. People will talk to me and say it's so great seeing somebody that's so young being so involved, because I can't get anybody that's under 30 to come to a union meeting, and we've got a lot of people under 30 in my local union, and they'll ask me how like for tips, and I'm kind of at a loss in some ways, and so has that been part of your remit as well, like working with local unions to do like recruitment drives for young people, or or even just getting young people who are members of the union to be more engaged, to be stewards, to step up into more leadership type roles, and just get more active, actually, like within the union, as opposed to thinking about like how can we strengthen coalition, or how can we strengthen our relationships with coalitions that the youth feel are important. That is important, but thinking through like within our unions. Have you done anything like that, or is that something that you're kind of working on?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought it up, because it's always two-part, honestly. It's always good to get more people into your union space, more membership, more strength, etc. But like, it's not going to mean much if you don't have internal strength as well. And so, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And that's absolutely something that we're working on, because when I first started working, that's kind of what we were talking about, was like, what are these unions doing just as individual unions to engage their younger worker base and make sure that there is like, internal organizing happening to ensure that their younger membership is engaging. And then what are we as a federation doing to help support that from our individual unions and our affiliates? Because we want to make sure that our unions are foundationally strong. And if it starts young, that's like the best, because then you're going to have people pretty much from the jump having engaged. They know how to do it. It's going to get easier and easier as time goes on, at least conceptually. Like, it becomes practice and habit to engage in your union that way. So if you get them younger and they understand the process from the get-go, then that, how could that be a bad thing, is them being engaged with their union, right? So those are both things that we are trying to bolster: individual union interaction with their membership, and bolstering union engagement from everyone, including especially younger members, as well as kind of providing like a federation support as well. And the ways that we're doing that, I've been attending a few of the LCL, like the different locales, like one in Boulder. We have BALC, Boulder Area Labor Council, and then we have DALF, which is a Denver Area Labor Federation, then the NCLC, which is Northern Colorado Labor Council, etc. And so I'll sit in on those meetings a lot, or I'll interact with a lot of the heads of those labor councils and introduce them to young workers for certain causes. Like, let's say they have like we'll get like emails from Northern Colorado Labor Council about like an action, and I'll make sure to get in contact with younger members that have already established a relationship up in Northern Colorado to attend those actions. So that's like more straightforward, like just literally using my connection as a younger worker to say, hey, fellow young worker, attend this, please. So that's one way. But another way that we're trying to encourage union members to engage in their own union is, one, set the example. Because sometimes I think it's really easy for older workers who've been in it for a really long time. They've been putting their all to it. And again, they've been kind of down and out for the past like 40, 50 years. So I can kind of imagine why they'd have a little bit of a jaded perspective to have to work with that kind of condition for so long. Like, we're there's a lot of things that us as young workers that we have to deal with that older workers never had to. And that's awful and horrific, and it should never be that way. However, we're coming into the work, especially the union life, the worker union life, that or movement, on an upswing, on a
Hmm.
sudden surge of union positivity. So we have to recognize that privilege as younger workers as well. So I
Hmm.
understand the frustration. But I think sometimes it's easy for older workers to kind of put the cart before the horse and saying, like, why don't you engage? And it's like, maybe set an example how one would engage. Maybe, instead of, it's really easy to assume people are apathetic. That's a really common word in the labor
Hmm.
movement. People are just apathetic. They just
Hmm.
don't care. It's not true. It's almost never true. For the most part, most people have something that they really care about. What seems like apathy is probably just they don't feel like it matters. They don't feel like
Hmm.
their voice matters. So, leading by example is something that I think is really, really important. When you lead by example, people will believe what you have to say. They'll trust that you at least put your money where your mouth is. And so I just try to attend as many events that I can attend to show, hey, I'm here to support you. So I
Hmm.
hope that you come to support me when it comes to those moments. And another piece that we're kind of trying to work on, or actually, what I should mention that I think is even cooler is, are you familiar at all, either of you familiar with the Grace Carroll Rocky Mountain Labor School, or Grace Carroll Labor School in general? Um, I
Hmm.
think Rocky Mountain is just like the Rocky Mountain chapter. No, okay. So apparently, I want to say it was like 40, 50 years ago. I don't remember how long it's been going on for, but there used to be like a handful of labor schools. There's kind of this debate whether it's like 4 to 7. And I feel like that's a pretty significant gap. But at least a handful of labor schools around the country where for like a week or two, um, unions around that county, that area, would send their members to this school for the week or two to learn several different facets of union engagement that are important both in the union and beyond. And one of
Hmm.
those, so it's literally just classes. Like you take classes from experts for about, excuse me, 2 weeks. You stay in these dorms. They're usually held on college campuses, or some sort of educational campus of some sort. They house the members, and they have them, like, the unions pay for these members who they think are a good investment to send for certain the classes that they have to offer, which usually the classes that are offered are, I'm not going to remember all of them because there's a lot of them. There's like internal organizing, external organizing, stewardship, bargaining a contract or contract negotiations, political engagement, labor history, labor law. Like, there's a bunch of really amazing classes that are so pertinent to the understanding of how a union works, what type of power you can get in a union, the different ways that you should engage with it. If you aren't happy with your union at all, if you're really upset, like, how do you engage with it? How do you get your fellow
Hmm.
members to engage with it, to change it, etc. And that's something that these union schools, apparently the only one left is the Rocky Mountain Labor School. And so uh, the Colorado AFL-CIO was the main host this year to the Rocky Mountain Labor School, Grace Carroll Rocky Mountain Labor School, that was hosted at the Colorado School of Mines in Golden. And it was like one of the first weeks in July. And what's really, really cool about this school is not only does it bring union members from across the Rocky Mountain region, so it's like Colorado, Arizona, um, Idaho, Utah, Nebraska, gosh, there's so many, Oklahoma. There was actually some people from like across the country, like New York and Minnesota. So not just the Rocky Mountain region. It's honestly anybody's welcome to come. It's just hosted in the Rocky Mountain region. Um, and Yeah, just these union members all come together from these different parts of the country, primarily the Rocky Mountain region. And we have two classes that all of us take together, and it's labor law and labor history. And or labor history, definitely labor law. There's labor law 1 and labor law 2, so depending on, you can attend it for multiple years. And so it brings everybody together who are part of a union, whether you're part of a super traditional union like the pipe fitters and the bricklayers and what have you, to something that's much more new and established like Starbucks Workers United. It brings these people together to learn history. In this case, there was a lot of state specific, like Colorado labor history, as well as like general labor
Hmm.
history. And then there are so many other classes that are like, this is how you get people to engage on a political level, within your membership, and doing internal organizing and understanding, like, yes, the ABCs of doing a campaign, like holding meetings, having agendas, like escalating and what that process looks like, as well as the sort of nebulous aspect of organizing, which is just creating a community and enjoying and wanting to protect and uplift that community and what that looks like. And so that's another piece of the Grayscale Rocky Mountain Labor School, is just the solidarity of it. Like you are physically in the space of these people for the next week. You eat with them. You after classes are done, you go out to drink with them if you want to. Like you establish these really amazing friendships in this week time. And so in the past, when some policy would come forth maybe at the local level or even at the national level that would like seem to really benefit, let's say, like the electrical workers, but ultimately would be a detriment to healthcare workers or Starbucks workers United or whatever it is, like retail workers. Maybe would have been a lot easier in the past to be like, well, this is a big benefit to the electrical workers. So sorry, we're taking it. Like we're going to support this legislation or whatever it looks like. Now they say, oh, no, 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 no. Not only did I learn in this school all these processes by which, labor history has taught me the solidarity in these actions is how we really get things done, but also the actual ABCs of getting people involved, the importance of talking to people, even if it's hard, and what solidarity actually looks like and how, I'm not going to let these policies or the temptations of this policy that may benefit me. I'm not going to let this force me to only see the tree as opposed to the forest. Like you need to see the forest. We can't, you can't see the forest from the trees. And a really easy way to combat that sort of isolation, that silo, is to establish places of solidarity, both in an educational sense. You're learning about your union membership and what that looks like and how to engage with it, as well as just injecting humanity into it. I think beyond the labor movement, this is me getting philosophical again, I'm sorry, but beyond the labor movement, I think American society really encourages people to be isolated, to be individualistic, to be siloed, to just focus on themselves. And, I think there's some importance of having agency. That's what you need to be engaged in your membership. People need to have some manner of motivation for themselves. You can't, force people to do this.
Right.
So there's that truth to it. But I think that's gone so much one way at this point that when it comes to the importance of seeing and engaging in community and what that looks like and how to actually behave and act as a collective for the collective good, that's a lot harder. It's which is it's a hard pill to swallow. And so I think even just the practice of seeing people for a week and being like, I know your face. You're a human. Like you're looking out for me. We broke bread together. We ate together. That's a huge part of solidarity that people don't think of because we're so work focused. We're such a work focused culture. So there's so many pieces that we've been trying to really feed and invest in that go beyond just the sort of blocks. Here's some trainings that the AFL-CIO has hosted in regards to getting your membership involved, and also digs into here. Let's break bread together. Let's celebrate together. Let's just enjoy each other's company together and learn together. So hopefully that answered. I'm sorry, I feel like I kind of went off, but
No. I think that's all great. Alindra Harris, Young Worker Organizer, Colorado AFL-CIO. Adam, do you have any other questions for Len before we let her go?
I just wanted to ask, like, if you have any words of encouragement for folks, perhaps. If you haven't, because you have struggled, you have gone through a journey in this movement, and I'm curious, just what would you encourage folks who think, you know what, I'm too tired, I'm too busy, I've got too much going on. There's always, we all can find these excuses, right? And that's not to delegitimize them. Like we all have things going on. So I guess that would be my question is what do you share with folks? Why should you do something?
Gosh, I feel like there's so much I could say, to be honest, which is not a bad thing. But I think a part of it is why should they do something? Because we all want to do something. Like we all feel it. I think that's the common ground that we all live on is we feel something needs to give. Something has to happen. And to go back to not seeing the forest from the trees, I think so many of us so many of us are kind of positioned intentionally by our society to be exhausted, to have all, most of the means with which we generate with our work taken from us so that we have to, scrounge for time, scrounge for money, scrounge for
Mhm.
inspiration and emotional,
Yes.
capacity to even survive and to continue even just doing our typical day to day, right? But I think for myself, and what I would say to kind of encourage people to keep going is, man, the satisfaction. And you know what? I'll just talk about what my grandfather in law said. He was a very active guy, and he would do a lot of very kind of crazy, strenuous outdoor expeditions that would kill some people if they slipped up, kind of situation. And one of
Mhm.
his friends asked him, like, as they were like paddling for hours and days against a headwind on a lake, just like terrible, grueling conditions. And he was like, why do you do this when it's so painful? And he said, because it feels so good when you stop. You
Mm.
feel so, you like, I did it. Oh my God, I'm doing it. Um, and that's how I feel. Like this is exhausting work. It's really hard, like to
Mm.
try to find the commonality with people in a time and an age where it is so profitable to inflame our differences
Hmm.
and to highlight those differences and use them um, as a means to instigate our division, it's really hard to find the commonality right now, and I think that's on purpose.
Mm.
Um, but like all of us, I think, have that feeling of we're not being taken care of. This isn't something isn't fair. This isn't fair, and we don't feel as though we're being listened to or represented. I think most people across the political spectrum feel that way. It's why there's such an intense divide right now when it comes to certain politics and politicians. Is like they feel this person really represents them, but no, this one doesn't, and what have you.
Mm.
Organizing your labor, as I've said in regards to addressing climate issues for myself, organizing your labor is the most effective way, I believe, to get your voice heard because our money is what makes everything run. Our money, the work that the laborers generate, and the like, even if you make $200,000, if you make $50,000, like you're a laborer, you work, whether you're a Republican or conservative, those people work, whether you are disabled or not, those kinds of people, every kind of person works. And if we can form solidarity around that, then I don't think, I believe more than anything, I'm just trying to be nice, I'm trying to be gentle. I believe that we will actually see our voice as the true wealth generators of this society. We will actually see our voice reflected in our society. That's what keeps me going. That's what I see reflected in, my union siblings, my union family, and people even outside of that who are just coordinating with us and supporting us.
Mm.
Is that not only does it bring people together, which is what I think we desperately need, is these commonalities, but it reflects a level of voice and power that I haven't seen in almost any other space. And so, if nothing else, if you really want to see your opinion about housing, your opinion about the environment, your opinion about your working conditions, your opinion about education, and how it needs to come to serve you, if you organize around how your money flows in and out of your community, you're probably going to see that change. So I don't know.
Mm.
It's just kind of like, hey, do you want to see change happen? Make it
Mhm.
happen.
Right.
But just also remember to take breaks. Remember to give yourself kindness and love. We're only
Mhm.
human. We're not machines. We're not automatons. We're not just workers. That's a false dynamic that America has sold us, is that you're only worth what you work, and that's just so wrong. So just be gentle and understanding and empathetic with yourself and with other people who may not be so quick to join you in the fray to begin with. Because when I started with Starbucks, like I said, so many of my coworkers were like, I'm too afraid. I can't lose my job. I can't do this. It took two
Mhm.
people supporting me. And then once we got in this boat together and they saw what they could achieve, it's changed their lives forever. So it's hard, but in the end, it's worth it. And now I'm going to step off my soapbox. Thank you so much for, for letting me speak.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure's all mine.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.